Hi everyone, welcome back to We Will Latina in Classical Art. In this video, we'll be going over the basics of pottery, sculpture, and temples. So first, we'll start with pottery, and these are the common types of pottery. We have the amphora, which was a two-handled vase used for storage and transportation. We have the rhyton, which you might remember from the Minoan's bullhead rhyton. So it was a drinking cup, often with the head of an animal. And then we have the calyx, another drinking cup, known for its shallow cup and the two handles. And then we have the canthoros, characterized by the head as the base. And then we have the hydria, a jug used for water, hence the name hydria. And it had three handles. You can't see the third handle here, but it was directly on the opposite side of the front shown. And then we have the lakithos, which was used for oils and perfumes and for pouring funeral libations. And then we have the oinokoi, which was a pitcher type vase. And then we have the crater, which was used for mixing wine with water, hence the large mouth. So next we'll go over the design styles found on pottery. So first we have the proto-geometric, which was around 1000 to 900 BC. And it was characterized by these black bands, wavy lines, simple geometric designs, and concentric circles. So very simple designs. You can see a mix of red and black paints used to decorate it. A lot of empty space, again, very simple, which is why it was the first style of decoration. And then next we have the geometric period, which was around 900 to 700 BC. And we see the introduction of human and animal figures, along with, very geometric designs, as one would think, but it wasn't just these designs. As you can see with the Diplon base, we have very, very simple human designs, and the Diplon vase is the most famous example of this. It's an amphora, and it was made by the Diplon master, so that part's pretty easy to remember. And it was a large vase that served as a grave monument and depicts a funeral scene, which is what's shown in the middle with all those humans. And then next we have the Orientalizing period, which is around 700 to 600 BC. So it shows this influence from the East with these decorative floral motifs and some animals. And this is the most famous example, the Eleusis amphora. So it depicts the blinding of Polyphemus by Odysseus. So Polyphemus is all the way on the right, and he's bigger than the other figures because as a Cyclops, he was a giant. And so the other figures are Odysseus and his men blinding him with a stake to the eye. And you can see that it's kind of like the proto-geometric style with the amount of empty space that's not necessarily all taken up by geometric designs, but it is much more complex than that with these human figures. And then you can see these floral motifs. You can see some animals down here below the humans. So this is the Orientalizing period. And then we have the block figure technique, which was developed around 700 BC, and it was developed in Corinth. So you'll see the design is silhouetted in black against the red clay. And first we have the Francois vase, which depicts the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, another mythological story. And then it's a crater that was by Cleietias. And then we have the Ajax and Achilles playing dice, amphora by Exechius. So this was a very common scene that you'll find depicted in a lot of pottery, but this is the most famous portrayal of it. And again, another mythological story. And then next we have the red figure technique, which was developed around 530 BC in Athens. And you'll see it's in direct contrast to the black figure technique. So the figures are left red and the background is black, which allows for greater detail and also foreshortening, which I won't really get into, but it is a technique that they were able to accomplish through this red figure. And then the most famous example is the death of Sarpedon, which is a crater painted by Euphroneus. And another mythological story. So next we'll get into the sculpture of classical art. So these have the different periods that we'll go into. So first we have the Archaic period, which is around 600 to 480 BC. So on the left we have a Kouros, which was a youth, like just made the name just meant youth, like a young man. So it's a male freestanding nude with 1 foot forward. It's very stiff. It has hair that kind of is like a wig and an unnatural looking archaic smile, obviously very characteristic of the archaic period. And then on the right are examples of a kore, which means maiden. So it's like the female version of a chorus. And these were freestanding, but they were always clothed, unlike the chorus. And two of these most famous examples, oh, sorry, are pictured here. The New York chorus and then the Peplos Kore. And then next in this archaic period, we have the calf bearer, which is from around 570 BC. And so on the right, you can see a really cool picture of when it was kind of discovered, the pieces it was in, and around some of the sculptures that it was found with. And then for obvious reasons, it has the name calf bearer because of the calf over its shoulders. But again, you can see this is kind of an example of a chorus in a way because of the male freestanding nude with the wig-like hair, the archaic smile. You can see all of those characteristics here. And then next we have the pediment from the Temple of Apphia at Aegina, which has the dying warrior, which is up here in the top left. So it's really cool when you can see this triangle formation that these statues create, because you can see the temple here. This would go in that triangle area at the top of the temple, which is why it's in this shape. So for instance, you can see this dying warrior here really would allow for it to fit within one of those sides of the triangle. And then we have the Critias boy, which is from around 480 BC, and this marks the end of the Archaic and the beginning of the Classical. So you don't see it as stiff. This is kind of the introduction of contrapposto, which we'll get into and see with the classical art. And later on, you can see it doesn't have that stiff wig-like hair. So we're kind of transitioning out of the archaic period. So next we have the classical period in the 5th century BC. So starting off strong, we have the Parthenon, the epitome of the classical period found on the Acropolis in Athens. So it had 92 metopes, which are like these things up here that decorate it kind of like friezes. And basically each side had a different story. So the north was the Trojan War, the east was the Gigantomachy, the south was the battle between the Lapiths and the Centaurs, and the west was the Amazon, basically the Amazon conflict. And then we have these friezes. Again, you can see here with this kind of sloping formation, this was meant for the pediment, where it's that triangle to fit into. And then on the right, we have the statue of Athena, which is a reconstruction in the Nashville Parthenon, because the original statue is lost, but it is Chryselephantine. which is basically just a combination of ivory and gold. So you'll see a lot of these classical statues. They're just like white and bland, marble, but they were often decorated back in the actual time period, and they've just lost that decoration and paint and all of that. So next we have the Zeus of Artemisium, which is on the left here. And so this is a bronze sculpture. So bronze was first used in this classical period to allow for these more natural positions. So with the marble of the archaic period, you can only do so much without it breaking, at least at that time. So they switched to bronze and making cast of it so that they could get these more dynamic positions. And then and so this is Zeus, and likely what was in his hand would have been a lightning bolt, which we don't have with the statue now. And then on the right is the charioteer of Delphi. So again, bronze, and you can see with this classical period, it's very idealized figures in idealized but dynamic stances. And then next, these are some more of the most famous classical period sculptures. So we have Discobolus, which all the way on the left, which means discus thrower, and it was sculpted by Myron. And this is a marble copy. So originally it would have been bronze for the reasons kind of discussed that I just talked about for why a lot of them were bronze. So this would have originally been bronze, but this is a marble copy done by the Romans, which is what survives. And then we have Dorophoros, which is in the middle, which means spear bearer. So you can see in his left hand, he would have been holding a spear. And this is by Polyclitus. And again, it only survives in marble copies. But you can see in all of these, this contrapposto, this very balanced stance that looks a little more lifelike than just the very stiff poses of the archaic period. And yes, so this contrapposto, it represents the ideal proportions of the human body. And then we have all the way on the right, the Ries bronze, which is again a bronze statue that is from the classical period. And then we have a few from the late classical period, which is the 4th century BC. So first we have the Hermes and infant Dionysus on the left. So again, we have this contrapposto. It's a very extreme contrapposto. You wouldn't see people just kind of standing around like this. And you see that S shape. And so that one is by Praxiteles. And then in the middle, we have Aphrodite of Cnidos, which is known only through copies, and it is the first life-size female nude and renowned for its beauty. Obviously, it was meant to depict Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. So that kind of checks out. And then we have the Apoxiomenos, which means the scraper, because of it's kind of like broken off, but you can see his hand that's bent would be holding a scraper that they would use back in the ancient times to like clean their skin. And it's also known only from Roman copies. And this was by Lysippos, who was Alexander the Great's personal sculptor. And he created a lot of sculptures idealizing Alexander the Great. And then next we have the Hellenistic period, which starts in 323 BC, because that is the death of Alexander the Great. So that's what starts this Hellenistic period, at least when you're looking at it historically. So the sculpture is much more dramatic and emotional than the classical period. More harsh diagonal lines, more movement, and then we have more realism. So for the first time, the elderly and unattractive are portrayed. So instead of this idealized version of everybody, it's a little more real. So that is kind of what can clue you into if it's Hellenistic or classical, because both, are kind of looked at as classical art pieces. But these have more emotion, more pain, more dramatic fabrics, especially. So on the right is the winged victory of Samothrace, or Nike of Samothrace. And you can see how dramatic that fabric is, waving behind her, very characteristic of this Hellenistic period. And then on the left, we have the Dying Gaul, which is from Pergamum, where there was an altar of Zeus. And these are gigantomachy friezes on the left, from the altar of Zeus at Pergamum. Again, you can see this dramatic fabric, these dramatic facial expressions. And then on the right is the Laocoon group. So this is Laocoon and his sons, another mythological story from Troy. And it basically is taken directly from a description in the Iliad about the event of the snakes being sent to kill Laocoon and his two sons. So you can really see these diagonal lines formed by Laocoon, and the pain on his face, the fear on the face of his sons, all of that, very, very Hellenistic. So that kind of covers the sculpture, and now we'll get into the temples. So this is the floor plan of a typical Greek temple. So we have the pronaos was kind of like the entryway, and then the naos was the main like room, which the statue of the god was kept in, and it was known by the cella, in Latin Cella. And then the opisthodomos was the back porch back here, and then the peristyle are these columns surrounding it. And then the stylobate was the top step of the platform on which the temple was built. And then the pediment, as we talked about earlier, was the triangle formed by the roof at each end of the temple. And sometimes it was filled with these sculptures like the ones we've been seeing. So these are the three main orders of the architecture for temples. So first we have the Doric order, which was pretty simple. So we talked about the Minoan like columns, and how they didn't have these like ridges on the sides, and they were also downwards tapering. So now we have these columns that kind of taper upwards instead of downwards. They have like lines carved into the sides of them. And then the Doric is the most simple of these styles, not much going on at the top. And then next we have the Ionic, which are known by these scrolls at the top. So they're similar to Doric, but they're a little more complex with these scrolls. And then we have the Corinthian, which are the most elaborate of these three typical styles, and they are known by the acanthus leaves at the top. And then there's later more elaborate designs, but these are the main three that will let you know what types of what style of temple you're working with. So first we have this is the Temple of Hera at Olympia, and it is in the Doric order because you can see these columns are Doric. They don't have any scrolls, they don't have any acanthus leaves. So this is the Doric order. And then we have the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, which is from around 460 BC. Again, you can see this big one kind of surviving column back there is in the Doric order, meaning that this temple was in the Doric order. Next, we have a much more intact example, which is the Temple of Hephaestus, which was in the Athenian Agora. And again, you can tell from the columns that it is in the Doric order. Next, we have the Propylaea, which was like the entrance to the Athenian Acropolis. So in Athens, all the major temples, kind of like their center was on the Acropolis. So this was the entrance to the Acropolis. These are two renditions of what they would have looked like back in the day, kind of like these entrance steps into the Acropolis. And then this is what it looks like today. So you can see these steps going up this big structure to kind of welcome you into the Acropolis. And again, you can tell from these columns, it is in the Doric order. And then next, the most famous example of all, the Parthenon, is in the Doric order, as you can tell from the columns. So this, the Parthenon was from around the mid 400s BC, and it was a temple to Athena on the Athenian Acropolis. And of course, Athens was named after Athena, so this she was their main goddess, and so this was their main temple. And it is the perfect embodiment of the Doric architecture. But it also contains elements of the Ionic order with the undivided frieze and 4 Ionic columns. So it is very mainly an example of the Doric order from the columns that are surrounding it. But there were other elements common to these orders, such as the frieze types and all that. So that's where a little bit of the Ionic comes in, but for all intents and purposes, it is a Doric style temple. So next we'll go on to the Ionic, which are, more decorative and ornate. So you can see these scroll columns on the left. This is the Temple of Athena Nike on the Acropolis by the architect Callicrates. And you can see these undivided friezes and then these scroll columns. And then on the right is the Erechtheum, which is on the Acropolis. And also, if you look closely, you can see those scroll columns. And then on the right, you'll see the Porch of the Maidens, which are these 6 caryatids, which are sculpted maidens used as columns. So this is very, this is a very important, this is a very iconic column type found with at the Erechtheum. And then we have Corinthians. So again, we have these acanthus leaves at the top, and this is the most ornate, which also means it's usually later, at the end of the 5th century, because as time goes on, stuff gets more elaborate. Um, so we have the Temple of Zeus in Athens, Temple of Olympian Zeus in Athens, which is shown here. So a lot of nicely surviving Corinthian columns, but not much else is surviving. But this is that Temple of Olympian Zeus in Athens.